Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Samuel Ward. Now, Samuel Ward was from Rhode Island, and in the decades leading up to the American Revolution, he had this ongoing rivalry with another American founder, Stephen Hopkins. Now, interestingly enough, Samuel Ward would run for governor against Hopkins on several occasions. The first time he lost and was almost immediately appointed as Chief Justice of Rhode Island. 2 years later, he was actually elected as governor of Rhode Island. At that point, Hopkins would go and become Chief Justice. And then when Ward's 2-year term as governor was up, which was the maximum at the time, well, Hopkins became governor and Ward went back and was Chief Justice again. 2 years later, what do you know? Hopkins' term was up and Ward became governor again. And they kept switching positions throughout the late 1750s into the 1760s. And Ward was actually still governor when the Stamp Act Congress was assembled to protest the Stamp Act that had been passed in Britain. Now, as governor, Ward oversaw the selection of representatives to the Congress, the Stamp Act Congress that took place in New York City. And one of those people was actually Samuel's brother, Henry Ward, who went and helped write and sign the petitions that went over to King and Parliament, requesting to get rid of these grievances that the colonists had, which successfully happened. Interestingly enough, time would go by, and then Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Ward decided to put across their differences. They put aside their differences, I should say, because the first Continental, what we now know as the First Continental Congress, was called together, and things had gotten so bad that despite this internal political rivalry in colonial Rhode Island, well, these longtime rivals decided it was time to work together. And they went to Philadelphia and they helped at the First Continental Congress. They ended up signing the Declaration of Rights and the Continental Association, both of which were the result of the First Continental Congress. Now, 2 years later, things still had not been resolved. And both Hopkins and Ward do go back to the Second Continental Congress, and they were both in favor of independence. In fact, Rhode Island itself was largely in favor of independence pretty early on. And once Thomas Paine, in January of 1776, writes Common Sense, the writing is fairly on the wall. Now, sadly, Mr. Ward dies in March 26th of 1776, just 2 months before the Declaration of Independence was voted on. And this is extraordinarily sad because he was still a fairly young man, still only in his 50s. And at the time, Philadelphia was known for getting certain sicknesses about. And Samuel Ward caught one of these diseases and passed away. Now, he more than likely would have ended up signing the Declaration of Independence. Rhode Island ends up voting for separation from the king and country in May of 1776. And Ward's friend, or now friend, longtime rival, Stephen Hopkins, was still there and did vote for independence. Hopkins famously would later go on, he was a lot older than Ward was and had palsy and a shaky hand, and he's the one with the famous line when he signs the Declaration, "My hand trembles, but my heart does not." And in a weird way, Stephen Hopkins was signing the Declaration both for himself and for his longtime rival, Stephen Ward, who had just passed away. And I will note, Stephen Ward was replaced by William Ellery, who did go on to sign the Declaration of Independence. So that is a brief overview of the life of Samuel Ward. I hope you liked something today. If you did, definitely hit like. If you're new here, subscribe. I talk about the American Revolution all week long. If you want to support this channel, check out the Patreon link down below. I post videos there, some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes into making Founder of the Day. So if you want to support this channel, make sure you check that out. And I'll be back with another Founder for you tomorrow.